You're great.
We have, it's now 6:05. I don't know if this is on. So, good evening. It is Tuesday, November 19th, and I call this meeting to order. First, the order of business approval of the agenda. But seeing that we, actually, the agenda is in front of you. If there's any changes or to the agenda, if not, I'll assume it to be approved. Seeing none, we'll approve the agenda as presented. Next is approval of minutes, which does need a quorum, and unfortunately, we don't have that at this time. So we'll put that on the burner, and hopefully we'll get up to there. It's not looking too hopeful. So now we're moving to the section where we allow public to speak. They're allowed up to 5 minutes on subjects. Well, actually, they can address in this meeting, they can address any issue they would want. In the big council meeting, they can only address things that are not on the agenda that evening. So if there's anyone confused with that, that's how we operate this. So now I think we can start with the first presentation of the evening. And that would be Workforce Development Department update. Aaron Krosky, HR, Workforce Development, and Senior Manager.
I forgot, I'm sorry.
And are you the only one presenting? Anyway, here we go.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, my name is Cassandra Tabor. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer, and Aaron invited me to join him this evening. This is my first time at one of the committee meetings, so thank you for having me. I just wanted to take a moment and introduce Aaron. He is the senior manager for our workforce development team within Human Resources. He has been with the council since 2008, and he started his service with our OEEO department as an individual contributor and then a leader on that team. And he has led our workforce development team since its inception in 2018. So he has a small but mighty team, and they currently have one vacancy that we're working on filling for him. His team supports all of the council's growth and operational goals for transit and is a very well-regarded partner, as is his team members. And he'll be speaking this evening about the work that he and his team do to help individuals find paths into and within the council to fill many of our much-needed, very important roles. So I will turn it over to him.
Thank you. Co-chairs, thank you very much for this time. I just want to say I appreciate the introduction, and for those who haven't had a chance to hear Cassandra talk about her work at the council so far, you're in for a big treat, hopefully in an upcoming EAC meeting. Having a front row seat to her leadership has been pretty special to watch, and I expect great things in the upcoming future. My name is Aaron Koski. There's no R, we had a little typo in the agenda item. And again, I've been with the council for 16, going on 17 years. And as Cassandra mentioned, my stint started with OEEO, and it's a time that I think of fondly, and especially with the EAC involved, as I got to watch Wanda Kirkpatrick and Pat Board create this concept and give it birth, and to see it grow and be what it is today is something I'm very happy to see. You should be very proud. Thank you for your time serving on this committee. Workforce Development Department. And of course, I'm stuck. Here we go. I have the fortune of reporting directly to Cassandra, the CHRO. I don't know what the G stands for. And as Cassandra mentioned, I have a staff of 3 current, of 4, with 1 being vacant. I'm here alone tonight because we are launching the first night of one of our programs over in Minneapolis for the CSO position, the Community Service Officer training program that we're helping run with MTPD. And so that started at 6 o'clock, and tonight's the first night, so that tells you kind of gives us a sense of what we're starting with number-wise, and we had 28 show up, so that's good news. I'm happy. So this presentation briefly will talk about our work with Metro Transit and the assisting individuals obtain their commercial learner's permit to become bus operators and train operators. Our pathway programs, which are what we call our flagship offerings in this department. The community connections that make all these programs work efficiently and productively. Building strong communities is something that I think also I'd like to share with you and what that could hold for the future on these large capital projects. And then finally, just touching on where we envision this work group evolving into and growing in the upcoming years. 2018 was the first year of our department. You can see in that photo picture right there. It is celebrating the first ever what we call a pathway program graduate. That is a group of mechanics who spent 2 years going to school as well as working at Metro Transit. And that picture, all but 3, I believe, are still employed with Metro Transit in their positions. Some are rising to becoming supervisors, shift leads, but it's extremely gratifying to see that picture and know that those faces are still with us. So the permits, I do have a little prop here today. You know, I think we played a role, and you can pass these down just to get a sense of what I'm sharing. We were a part of, I would say, solving probably the biggest crisis that Metro Transit has faced in the last 20 years, and that was an operator shortage. Historically, Metro Transit bus operators, 10 years ago, 3 out of 4 of them were current bus operator drivers in the marketplace, fully credentialed. Since that 10 years, you can see the trend line reduce. And those individuals without a commercial driver's license or a permit started applying more and more to Metro Transit, becoming operators. Great. So the problem was that these new people without any previous experience or credential had to first get their permit. And I passed out the manual from the state, and in here, there's a lot of content that you have to know, fully know, to get your learner's permit. Like a driver's license, you need a knowledge test permit first. So you have to pass 3 tests: general knowledge, passenger and air brakes, all at an 80% success rate. And we tackle that by creating what we call week 0. Basically, there's a lot of challenges with working with this group, as again, 75% are coming without previous experience, so are not familiar with large vehicles, the specifics of dealing with large buses. Many of them haven't read or tested in many years, and we also have a number of individuals who are English language learners. So we created week 0, which is 1 week, their first week of being a paid employee of Metro Transit, when all they come in is with a normal driver's license to operate their normal car. And we give them 1 week of instruction, 5 days, where they will read this manual and then take our quizzes online to simulate the actual tests. We also bring them to the testing center, whether it be Arden Hills or downtown Minneapolis, and we cover the cost of the permits as well as those costs if they take more than 2 test attempts. So right there, my staff and I developed a bank of 300 questions to simulate those quizzes, and we can track them as they're online, and we can see their progress and their growth. I'm happy to say that this program started last year, and to date, really to date, we have about 460 individuals who have earned their permit through our programs. And the raw number is great, but the success rate of 95% for train and 91% for bus is also something we take a lot of pride in. It's really special to meet these individuals on a personal level, hear their stories, feel their excitement. They really are excited to become a Metro Transit bus operator. And this first week is fantastic because they get to know themselves, get comfortable, and they start their career off with a success, passing this hard test that they probably wouldn't have done without that assistance, or at least not as quickly. Move on now to our pathway programs. And these are multi-step, multi-year, large pathway programs designed for individuals with no or limited experience. And it's really targeting these positions that we have a hard time weaving Metro Transit Met Council to find skilled craft frontline workers. We're talking mechanics for buses, mechanics for rail, electronic technicians, community service officers, LRT systems. And this has really been a tool we've used in the way we administer these programs to really increase the diversity and to fight the disparities found in these frontline technical positions. Because it requires no experience, no credential, we really have it's a learning opportunity. You're gonna be employed and then learn that trade, learn that skill, gain that credential. And by that situation, we're allowed to really target and entice females and people of color to take advantage of these programs. At a high level, these pathway programs are basically a 5-step process. Our outreach and enrollment, recruitment at the very beginning. Then we have what we started tonight over in Minneapolis, a readiness or pre-apprenticeship, pre-training curriculum, which is required for everyone to attend. It's their chance to kind of put skin in the game. And for them to know about this opportunity, for us to know their level of commitment, the skill that they're bringing to us. And they do this without being compensated. They're not employees, they're doing this on their own time. From that group, then we select those individuals to fill those trainee or apprenticeship positions. Now they become employed. Now they enter into a 1, 2, or even 3-year period of time where they're employed, benefit earning, union eligible, but they're learning the position. They're not producing. The whole time period is structured for them to accumulate and gain the skills and talents needed to work the position. And then we see them graduate into that target position in about 1 to 3 years. We just wrapped up our second apprenticeship cohort for the bus technicians, so mechanics. I kind of superimposed on that 5-step model some of the results. We had 131 external, meaning not currently Metro Transit employees, contact us and enroll in this opportunity. 70% were people of color, 5% were female. These apprenticeship programs also involve current ATU Metro Transit employees at entry-level positions for give them a chance to advance up into that technical position. We got to that phase 2 where now they have to come in and kind of demonstrate their excitement, their willingness, skin in the game, if you will. We had 17 externals and 12 internals, and the externals were 71 people of color percent and 6% female. Really proud, and we did a few things to ensure we kept that female participation solid, as that is one of greatest underutilizations in our skill craft are the female workers. I don't have demographic information on the internals, but I can definitely tell you the majority are people of color as well. Last week, they all 17 and 12 completed their interview, and we'll move on 7 externals and 7 internals to be a cohort of 14. We'll then go into that phase 4, which is a registered apprenticeship, which requires them to spend 6,000 hours on the job learning the skills, both hands-on, classroom, involved with mentors. And we kind of hand off this group to the training department, Metro Transit, but we still stay engaged to help them with any obstacles that we can help address. And then again, in 2028, we expect to see ideally all 14 advance on to become journey person technicians. These pathway programs, of which are about a dozen, have generated 53 alumni currently employed at Metro Transit. That number of graduating is higher, right around 65. We did lose some. Most of the times when we lose people, it's to a different opportunity, a different job using that credential. So sometimes it's the military, sometimes it's a different organization, but 53 are still employed at Metro Transit. And you see a high percentage, over 3/4, are female and or people of color. 19, again, are coming from Metro Transit frontline positions who use this opportunity to advance their career. And then 34 came from the outside, meaning off the street. That's a picture of a light rail group that did their training at light rail, and many of them are still with us, both in vehicle maintenance as well as systems and track maintaining. I'd like to move on to community outreach. The work that we do in that HR department is supported really has its roots in OEEO, and that continues to today. We really take a hands-on proactive outreach approach that can conveniently be broken into 3 groups: nonprofits, cultural groups, and faith-based organizations. We believe in promoting opportunities in multiple languages. Obviously, our positions require English proficiency, but understanding these communities, we often catch eyes. We often show a sign of respect if we try to first reach out to them in their native language. So that's a part of our marketing strategy. We spend many days at local masjids for Friday prayers, often with bus operators with us, members of that community. Spend time most recently at the Tibetan Foundation of Minnesota, working with that community. We take a lot of personal pride to see those connections bear fruit and having those individuals take advantage of our programs and become Transit Council employees. And finally, building strong communities. This program is a pre-apprenticeship program designed by Workforce Development, Met Council, OEO as well, and the local union construction trades. And the idea, the thought was that we're going to help increase diversity. So when we build our next light rail, when we build our large construction projects, that our contractors have at their disposal a diverse construction workforce. Right now, our current goals of Ashante is 25%. Sorry, put you on the spot while you're eating.
Current workforce goals?
Yes.
32 and 20.
32 and 20, 32% people of color and 20 female. I don't think many contractors, many public organizations are able to meet that goal. And it's not always because of lack of trying, it's because that population, the union workforce is not diversified yet. But programs like these that we can take pride in really is helping bring that corner. This past year, we celebrated our 6th completed cohort. That was an opportunity to MC that event. And it was great to see that 105 individuals were graduating and were guaranteed a job in a union. Maybe not the union of their choice, but between the 12 involved unions, they were all guaranteed a role as an apprentice. And that continued with 80% people of color and or female, which I would like to say I'm confident will hopefully show the results soon with light rail expansion or other major capital project. Our contractors are going to have a much deeper, more diverse pool to choose from. And then finally, with Cassandra's guidance and leadership, our thoughts are turning towards what our department is going to look like in a few years. Next year, I can say that we are definitely going to continue our established pathway program. So the technician apprenticeship will have another cohort. We'll have 2 cohorts for the community service officers. We'll have another cohort for light rail. And we're also creating new pathways. We're in talks with IS department, with MTS and other transit departments to bring these solutions to solve their needs. What I'm really leaning on is Cassandra and her help to frame out a multi-year framework of what this department can be and how we can be sustainable while maintaining our impact. I look forward to those conversations, and hopefully in a year or 2 I can come back and share with you those developments. I think that is it. Thank you for your time. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Councilor.
Thank you for the program. Seems like a great program. I like the diversity. I like the way you built in the respect into the program as far as the language outreach and all that. I just had a curiosity. What are the #1 feeder occupations for your bus operators and your rail operators separately?
That's a great question. Councilmember. We actually did a study with my team where we interviewed about 80% of the new operators to try to understand where they're coming from. And the answer is all over. I don't want to be flippant, but it is incredible the broad range of previous work experience our operators have. One commonality I will say is that the majority of them, the vast majority of them, either had a relative, a family member who was a transit employee, or a friend or a neighbor, and at one point, they told this individual that transit was a great place to work, great benefits, great security, opportunities for growth, and for whatever reason that stuck with them. And so a life event or some reason kind of ignited them, and they decided to move forward. But we've had bakers, we have drywall people, we have former accountants, nonprofits, quite a few Amazon drivers, but really the commonality is there is no commonality in many respects, profession-wise.
Okay, and do you guys ever recruit like former military? I know the military has a lot of bus drivers, particularly the Army has an awful lot.
Yep.
Do you guys ever link up with, because they have a process they have to go through prior to being discharged where they're screened, and some often they make contact with local employers and things. Do you guys ever link up in that way?
Not just for, council member, not just for bus operators, but for all our positions. Military experience is a desirable qualification for a lot of the positions we work with. We do have relationships with Helmets to Hard Hats, which is a good organization that connects veterans with job opportunities. I'd like to say that I wish we could do better. Minnesota has its unique challenges, I think, with the veteran population for whatever reason. But I know that we do have success. Sometimes it's luck, but I think relationships with Helmets to Hard Hats and other organizations like that are there in place and are helping.
Thank you. This has just been really good information, and I am very, very pleased to know the work that you all are doing, particularly in designing and moving pathways through the Metropolitan Council to get people into better paying work and from scratch. So thank you for this important work. I was looking, you know how sometimes you just get so intrigued by the slides that you're behind, you have to catch up. So let me admit, thank you for your tolerance while I catch up a bit. First, I just wanted to ask a few questions regarding slide 7 and 8 actually. Glad for the departments impacted and the variety of work that we're training people into and beyond. Observant of the time that it takes to get in and knowing that this is a training period and people are investing as we invest in them.
Yes.
You know, the time required is certainly time that only some people can afford, and we're making way for them to, through that investment, get onto their jobs and help us out too. Are these is this a full-time investment? I'm not sure whether I knew you know, in this process of pre-apprentice and apprentice, well, pre-apprentice work in particular, whether people are with us full-time for that or months.
Yep.
They are with us full-time, daytime hours.
Oh, no, I understand the question, okay. Councilmember. Councilmember, the phase 2 is usually about 4 or 5 weeks.
4 or 5 weeks.
And we have these sessions about twice a week.
Okay.
For 2 hours at a time.
Okay.
They're going on right now. Why? Because everyone has a job. There's
Right,
very
right.
few unemployed individuals who go to our program.
Okay.
So we shift these opportunities to the evening so they can still balance their work, their
Okay.
current job while
Thank
they're
you.
pursuing.
Thank you, because I was, of course, wondering, oh my God, you know, so are we supporting them? Are their children
Yeah.
getting childcare and all of that? So that's helpful. And still, you know, although it's that short amount of time, there can be some support requirements. And so are we looking at offering, working with the county to provide, you know, the kinds of supports that folks might need to get to us? Transportation, childcare assistance for those hours?
Councilmember, we do provide transportation.
We can
Metro
do that.
Transit, yes, we can do that. We have, unfortunately, I don't think we've had the need or the ability to provide childcare, for example, or other types of support.
Okay.
What I can say is we do have partnerships with select nonprofits in the community that provide us candidates or that we connect them with to provide those family support that you're
So for
talking
those who
about.
need it, we have
Correct.
partnerships,
Yep.
that's excellent. You mentioned that 53 alumni are employed. I do know your goals for people of color, female, the phase 1, phase 2 that I'm looking at on page 9 represents the outreach and the engagement.
Correct.
So the outreach was, we are working with these folks to recruit them, and then that engagement are those that actually come to us and are moving through the program.
Exactly.
So then we're looking and we're selecting, so we've selected of that 17, external 7, and thank you just for letting me catch up. And then the final question is regarding that apprenticeship time that they're with us. From the time they join us, they're hired as an apprentice. Beyond that period of the 3-year program, classroom, on-the-job mentorship and all of that, through phase 5, when they advance to the journey person status, can you give me an example of what that salary might look like? What's that growth?
Yes, council member, this specific position, bus technician apprenticeship, an external person off the street will have their first salary be about $27 an hour. Year 2, that jumps to $32 an hour. By year 3, then they're then what's called on scale, if you will, and I believe that is $44 an hour.
That's quite a progression
That's
within a
quite a
3-year
progression.
period.
Yes.
And at the journeys person status, what would that be?
Well, then they
Is that
not as
transfer?
aggressive, but now they're in our, you wanna help with that?
Yeah, then they're in our pay grids and they're moving forward with all of our other union employees
So
as
that's the
negotiated.
regular things. Thank you so much. I am so encouraged by this work. I appreciate it. The questions were for my information and so that I am able, and all of us are able to encourage people because this is a good route, this particular position, and I'm sure all of the others. Thank you.
So I
Is there
get
a question?
I have a quick question. With your pathway and apprenticeship programs, I know you said you work with a lot of nonprofits and other organizations. Do you, do any of them, involve people that have maybe prior injustice, justice involvement?
Council member, yes, we do work with organizations whose clients do include those who have previous justice, I don't know the right term to use, but yes, I have
Went to jail?
Like a criminal history.
criminal history.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me.
Could be felons.
Could be, yes. We are limited in some respects to the positions. We mentioned the CSO position now, and that obviously has a higher threshold. But I think, in my experience, I have been encouraged by the care that goes into each decision by not only HR, but the home department to see if we can make these situations work. And yes.
You had a question? No.
One more follow-up?
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
did somebody else have? Oh, okay, this is really quick. This cohort is completing in 2028. Will there be a next cohort overlapping that period?
Councilmember, yes, now that we've kind of established proof of concept and the need is still there and growing, Metro Transit Maintenance has committed to launching a cohort each year.
Each year.
So it may not be as large as 14 each year, but there will be a cohort next year. Previously, it was every 2 years, now it'll be on an annual basis.
So we should be starting to look for folks to bring in next August or so? Thank you so much, thank you.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the time frame from phase 1 to 3. Are they getting paid or is it all volunteer?
Councilmember, phase 1 to phase 3 is on a volunteer basis. So it is,
So you got 131 external,
Mhm.
that's individual.
yes,
You got 93 internal,
yes.
it's about 224.
Mhm.
And then you go to phase 2, then it's 17.
Mhm.
So it's just a weeding out process
Yes.
for the coming.
Councilmember, I will say that a number of those 131, while they enrolled, when they go to an information session, which is required, and they learn about what is expected of them, they learn about the salary. Some of them say, this is not for me, this is not for me now. But I would say a healthy number still want to pursue it. So now we're in a position where we have to reduce that number to a more manageable size, with only 7 at the end. So we have a number of ways we perform that.
Gotcha.
And I might just add to that as well. I think of these phases similar to any other hiring process you would go through. It's voluntary, so you're applying for a position, similar concept. You're applying to be part of a program. You're attending information sessions, which we do in the evening again, so it doesn't interfere with any other work. You're agreeing to understand what you think you might be interested in, similar to a hiring process. Once we get to the point where we're actually selecting candidates like you would in a hiring process, that's when the compensation kicks in. So if you think about it, similar to a hiring process, which is voluntary as well, anytime you apply for a position, that's similar in these first couple of phases.
Because when you read the number, and you look at the percentage that finally gets in, it gets stronger phase 2, phase 3. But when you look at the initial phase 1, if you didn't have context, you'd be like, what are they doing? You got 224 people coming in August, and then all of a sudden in November and December, they're just hiring 14 people, right? So I think for me, it was just really confusing in terms of phase 1 or phase 3. That's why I was asking. But I mean, when you look at like any other hiring process, those who come to the booth, you check it, number comes in, and then at the end of the day, you just get maybe 3 applicants that walk away with an application, right? But, you know, maybe 50 people come to the booth.
Councilmember, I would also say that this also speaks to the reputation our programs have in the community. We got to the 131 in a matter of 3 weeks in August.
Wow.
So we had to close the enrollment down about 4 weeks early. So those are all strong indicators that we have a good pipeline established.
A question as well, maybe I'm just reading or missing something here, but is the program all on bus technicians? Because you're referring to drivers and to others, is there multiple positions that go along with that cohort?
As Councilmember, the previous model is basically a model that we adjust and modify for a number of positions: bus mechanic, light rail vehicle mechanic, ticket vending machine technicians, light rail signal technicians, community service officers. All those positions follow the same basic model. Those are modified both in time, size, but they all have the same feel, if you will, of this progression. We're talking about the bus operator work that we do for the permits. That really is a different animal in the sense that those are, every week we have 10 that we're training. And our engagement lasts a week with them, as opposed to these, as you can see, which lasts up to 3 years plus. So it's really a different animal.
Any questions, Yes.
Once they've gone through the apprentice training process and they've not been selected, are they still potential pipeline candidates?
Thank you. Councilmember, in phase 4, all of the trainees or apprentices will need to ensure they're hitting the mark in terms of gaining those skills and talents. If they're not hitting the mark and they are an internal candidate, then they will go back to their previous position. If they're an external candidate and for whatever reason are just not making the mark, we've only had this happen twice. In both cases, they did stay on Metro Transit, but they went down to that lower entry-level position or were offered that position. and they did take them. So they remained employees, but not at that target position.
But if I'm looking at the pre-apprentice training, they
Oh,
have not
oh.
been hired.
Thank you.
Okay,
Councilmember, yes, thank you very much. We do have a lot of disappointed individuals at the end. We mentioned that 131 and 17 getting down to 7. So yes, we do have individuals who go through our programs and they aren't successful. And we do see a lot of repeat visitors who come back, yes. This current cohort that we just graduated from the apprenticeship technician, 2 of those externals went through the same process 2 years ago. Kind of held their breath, waited their time, and then they waited until this opportunity arose, and we think, well, they're gonna get in this time.
well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, yes, okay. All right, well, thank you. This is actually very informative. Going through this stuff. I like the way you laid it out as well. I just kind of
Yeah.
like to see how that's done for these other areas as well, and see if they match up. And maybe you do a better job of recruitment, or some of the other departments focus on a different need, doesn't, so I appreciate the outlook.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to our next presentation. We have, all of us have the document. You'll be going over. Okay, and this one's online, or this, how do we go about getting this done? There we go.
Yes. Our team from Strong and Starlight is joining us online to present.
All right, good evening, everybody. Is everybody able to hear me just fine?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good evening. Good evening, co-chairs, council members, committee members. My name is Tessidra Jones. I am the CEO of Strong and Starlight Consulting, Inc. For me, everybody is a very tiny tile, and so I can't see names from here, and so hopefully I've addressed everybody who is in the room. And so for this evening, I'm going to present on the small business equity audit in terms of our report and sharing updates in terms of what we assessed in this process. I am joined here today with my colleagues Lenora White and Martha Hernandez Martinez are also here as well once we get to questions. And so we'll jump right in terms of the presentation for this evening. And so the small business equity audit process is really a project in terms of looking at the language audit here. We were there to assess, identify, and recommend. In terms of the framework and the research questions that our team looked at throughout this process, we really took time to assess what were the asks within the RFP, which really fell into 12 different particular asks, and those each fell into 3 different buckets that we have here on the screen. Big picture, as we were assessing and evaluating, we were really looking at key policies, programs, procedures, and practices related to areas within procurement that may be creating barriers for accessing contract opportunities and awards, especially as was noted in the RFP for BIPOC businesses and small businesses. We had an ask within that to be able to look at past and current practices and how those impacted short, medium, and long-term goals for the business inclusion programs that exist at the Metropolitan Council. In addition, a few other things we were asked to look at included within some of those barriers that may exist was language access a potential barrier as well for certain businesses to be able to contract with the Metropolitan Council. And within that 12, a few things that fell into the recommendations bucket pertain to taking time to look at what was happening in the broader field, for example, other jurisdictions across the country, to be able to, within the recommendations, be able to speak to whether there were other successful processes and policies and programs that exist across the marketplace that could present an opportunity for the Metropolitan Council to build on what could be working elsewhere rather than reinventing the wheel. And so within these 3 buckets, we really framed the way that we approached our work within this project. So our methodology had 5 key components that we structured in looking at what we were asked to do within this audit. And so again, with the audit, I do want to distinguish not a disparity study and audit, so we're there to assess. And so within this process, first, we created a core team. And what that consisted of was 3 staff from OEEO, and then we created an extended core team that included other staff staff that served as subject matter experts specific to business inclusion programs at the Met Council, and then we engaged some procurement staff as well. The intention for the core team was so that we can have a consistent touch point throughout the project, at least twice a month, to be able to ensure we're on track or ask questions, but also collaborate and being able to look at the engagement that took part in bucket 2 here within our methodology, where we were focusing on discovery through listening. As much as our team has done research related to this across the country, we really want to focus on a local place-based approach by listening to the existing staff and business owners who navigate these systems that exist in the form of policies, programs, and procedures at the Metropolitan Council. So in developing that listening methodology and approach, we took the time to develop a series of questions that we worked with the team, especially on the survey for the business owner survey, going back and forth to ensure we're capturing what we needed there. We also took time to identify target groups to be able to engage throughout this process, both on the staff and business owner side, and developing a framework for how we'd be able to engage them with key research questions that connected to the methodology within, or the ask within the RFP, but then also to build on past work that the Met Council did, recognizing the survey fatigue and engagement fatigue that businesses, especially BIPOC businesses, over the last 4 years have been experiencing. So rather than asking the exact same thing with the same kind of outcome, being able to build on what was done previously, for example, with surveys done in 2021. We then, after taking the time to listen to staff and business owners to hear what do they see as opportunities, barriers, challenges, and areas for improvement, to see how does this then map over what's happening in the field across the country. And so each of these 5 buckets built upon the prior bucket. And so with the field scan, we took time to really listen to what we heard from staff and business owners and see, while we research what exists across the country, is this thing that the staff or business owners suggested happening elsewhere? How do we assess that? And so the field scan looked at some of those things and then broader recommendations based off of practices. The infrastructure assessment then took the lens of what we heard from staff and business owners, what we saw in the field, to then narrow that focus specific to what currently Metropolitan Council has in place related to policies, programs, and practices. And how does that compare to what business owners and staff were sharing, as well as what we found across the broader field. Lastly, that funnel narrowing down even further, the 5th bucket looks at our analysis, our data analysis, qualitative, quantitative data analysis, infrastructure assessment, and drafting those final recommendations that we've shared in this report for the Metropolitan Council, to be able to say, based off of all of this, these are areas that we are recommending could be a path forward for the Metropolitan Council in light of what we heard, what we saw, and what we observed by looking at the infrastructure. So through our engagements, we had this funnel process yet again, where we engaged staff and business owners through listening sessions, where they did a pre-survey through registration. Then we were able to actually dig deeper in small group discussions. For business owners who were unable to attend a listening session, we also had the option to schedule a one-on-one interview. As you can see, only 3 business owners took us up on that offer. And then the last piece there, which had the broadest reach, was the survey, where we were able to survey both business owners and staff throughout this process. Combining the survey and the listening session engagement, we engaged 193 business owners through those 2 components of our methodology in the listening, and 74 staff. In this process, from the very beginning of the project, we did discuss in the methodology to try to have it as open as possible, especially with that lens we were looking at, is language access a potential barrier, and had recommendations from the beginning to be able to ensure that survey, landing sites, materials could be translated and accessible. As part of the registration, we also had recommended to be able to have questions, which we did include, to ask people if they would need language or ADA access throughout the process. We did, as we'll highlight later in our recommendations and infrastructure assessment, have some challenges despite the great efforts of OEO staff to be able to get some of those pieces in place, but we were ultimately able to have the survey translated later in the process. And so in terms of breaking down who we heard from and disaggregating data, for us, when it comes to listening, no community is a monolith. And so the small business community is very diverse. And so we wanted to ensure that we had opportunities, especially with the survey having the broadest reach, to be able to break down by race and by gender, as well as veteran status. And we also disaggregated by stage of business, as well as prime status, in a very interactive site that breaks this down, so we could see what was important for each of these communities as well. As you could see here in terms of some of those dominant voices, which I'll have on the next slide as well, we had a higher percentage of females engaged throughout this process in women-owned businesses. We also took the time, as you could see here, to disaggregate the female disaggregation, because again, although this audit is not a disparity study, often in studies related to business inclusion, the minority female component of it is often grouped in with the minority business enterprise aspect of things. We do recognize through doing research and reading reports such as those that have come out in the last 4 years by American Express and Wells Fargo Bank, who had looked at the state of women-owned businesses, those reports took a great deal of time to disaggregate data by race within gender to highlight some of those distinctive factors and barriers, as well as opportunities within those communities. We have done the same. And so when we think about the voice here, we want to highlight that the participant voice that's noted within this process has this larger female DBE businesses who use subs and those in a growth stage, because again, with the particular group of those who we were able to engage, what's important for any one of those may not be the case for another business in a particular group. And so keeping in mind that this is the lens of who showed up, and who showed up is the voice that we're hearing here. And so jumping into this next part, which gets to that part too within our methodology, looking at the themes of what we heard from engaging the business owners. And so through engaging the business owners, we had a number of different themes come up. We really whittled those down into 6 buckets. But as I move through this next section, I do want to highlight that because we start with listening, we wanted to really root this in their voices and what we heard from them. So on each of these slides, you're seeing quotes from what we heard specifically from the voices, no editing on our part, but really what they had to share. And so the first theme that we want to highlight that came up overwhelmingly so across engagements was looking at business owners struggled to find contracting opportunities specific to the goods and services that they provide. As you can see here, 50.37% have not done business with the Met Council, and 48.15% identified not knowing where to find opportunities as their top 3 barrier. For additional context, the question asked was if you could identify your top 3 barriers to contracting with the Metropolitan Council, and asking the businesses, we wanted them to identify which ones, if removed, would be most impactful for their business. And so with that percentage, that not knowing where to find opportunities came up across the board when we disaggregated by race and growth stage. It was within the top 3 for all businesses. And so that being something that surfaced, the question then rose for us, okay, so is it just not finding businesses, not finding the opportunities due to a Google search or knowing where it was on the website? That was not necessarily the case. It's more specifically for businesses that as much as they may sign up for the email alerts or can get to the website, it's difficult to navigate and find businesses specific to the goods and services that they provide. They made suggestions such as adding a search field on the website, or being able to allow for opportunities to be broken out by industry, like construction, professional services, goods, other services. Being able to have those kinds of distinctions would help them to more easily find what they're looking for, instead of getting emails that have, especially for professional services businesses, which we engage 50%, we're in that bucket, naming that a lot. As you can see here, we're focused on construction and figuring out how to move through all of that. The next theme pertains to looking at contracting capacity versus average dollar amount secured. And so with this particular piece, we can see that a majority of the businesses that were engaged, and this is in the aggregate, noted a contracting capacity over 175,000. However, over 50%, as you can see here as well, noted average amount for contracts secured 175 or less. Again, when we disaggregate this by race and by gender, really seeing that distinction of many having contract opportunities around that 175 threshold or less, really being what they secure, while they're noting across the board a much higher capacity. And so for this raised a few questions that related to some of the things business owners said about having opportunities that are right size for them, so that they don't necessarily have to come in under a prime as a sub, but also opportunities that allow for them to appropriately grow and scale their business over time. And it's not that a high percentage of the businesses were only in business for 5 years or less. In fact, a higher percentages of businesses have been in business for 10 years or over 10 years that we were engaging. Third theme, improvements to the technology could benefit both business owners and staff. Through the listening sessions, both staff and business owners really highlighted challenges in navigating the technology available. Staff navigating the technological solutions to find certified businesses, and business owners, as I've already highlighted, in finding opportunities. And so each of those groups had made suggestions about ways to improve each of those systems. In fact, 82.9% of the staff really said having an updated and improved searchable database would help increase their use of MCUBs and DBEs. And so this was a part that within the listening sessions with business owners, we actually walked through the site and they went through and highlighted some of those improvements that could be made. The fourth one here, looking at accountability. For this piece, with our staff surveys that we had and seeing that we didn't quite reach the full amount of those we were hoping to engage, we also did look at the Metropolitan Council's culture survey, which was not administered by our team, but had a much larger reach, engaging over 2,000 staff. And so in looking, we wanted to look at that to supplement what we were hearing from staff through the listening sessions. And it did align with accountability coming in as one of the top 2 challenges or things addressed by staff to have addressed, as well as transparency being the number 6 here. I note that this aligned because we've heard from staff in the engagements, having leadership held accountable, as we see here on the screen, could then lead to holding staff accountable. Once we get to the infrastructure assessment recommendations, could talk a little bit more about what accountability look like from the field scan for other jurisdictions. The 5th piece here, increasing and updating training and resources for staff and business owners, improving their use of the tools. At the Met Council, there are a number of workshops and training that staff in several different departments, procurement, OEO, have offered to other staff, as well as opportunities for business owners to learn. This here is really getting at being able to increase and update what's available in terms of resources, such as a guidebook for business owners. As we can see, 82.21% of business owners said having a guidebook on how to do business with the Metropolitan Council would be a very helpful tool. So really breaking down how to navigate the various processes. And we asked follow-up questions as to what would be most important for them to include within that guidebook, and business owners shared that as well. Lastly, increasing strategic opportunities for staff and business owners to connect could be welcomed. And so through engaging both staff and business owners, being able to, for the staff side, for some staff highlight, they may work with those they've worked with before, either from challenges of finding businesses in the system or where it's easier. And for business owners wanting to have contact information with key staff and connecting with decision makers, the Met Council already does do meet and greets, but some of those meet and greets, at least from the time that we've been working, really have had really great feedback and success that's come back in terms of impact for businesses. This recommendation really is driving into more opportunities for that and more intentionality behind that, as business owners have shared a desire for more of that, as well as staff. And so as we look at the field scan, we were keeping in mind those 6 buckets of recommendations and areas of challenge or barrier opportunity that we just covered in hearing from staff as well as business owners. And so we whittled down the field scan to fall into 6 buckets that we've considered to be priority areas that we looked at specifically as we were preparing for the recommendations and infrastructure. And so those 6 particular areas that we were looking at based off of what we were hearing is assessing across the field what's happening specific to policies, procedures, and programs. Secondly, people and practices. Third area, looking at data and IT, so reporting and accountability components. Training and education, access, outreach, and engagements, 5. And then lastly, marketing and communications. With that, thinking how that intersects with what's really put out there on the internet in response to the challenges of finding opportunities. And so what I'm going to do now is drive through a couple of case studies, at least highlight 1 or 2 key things that we found. It was a broad scan, so we don't have time to go through all of them, but just highlight a few key things. So as it relates to policies, procedures, and programs, in this area, we assessed 9 areas from the field related to this. So below are just a few examples. We looked at what are other jurisdictions doing related to prompt payment. Through engaging business owners and staff, although in the themes we didn't dig into that, that was something that came up as well, not necessarily in the top 3, but other challenges and barriers for small businesses. We looked at the impact of that on cash flow and late payments. We also looked at areas related to bidding preferences. And so where there are opportunities that the Met Council may be able to learn from others and do more or different things than they have in place. as well as looking at the ask in the RFP of how to increase that opportunity and drive opportunity and meet those long-term, short-term, and midterm goals. We looked at incentives for primes, good faith efforts, both internally and externally, and spending plans. One thing that we want to highlight here is looking at prompt payment and late penalties. Out of the state of California, they have something that we thought could be worth learning from. Specifically, they have a prompt payment a late payment penalty, reporting dashboard. And so not only do they have within their state statute, as many state statutes do have clauses related to timeliness for when both the contracting entity, so the government entity, is paying a particular contractor, as well as when somebody that they're contracting must pay their subcontractors. What we found interesting about this is that, like many others, they do have an interest that must be paid if things are not paid on time, but they have a dashboard that highlights in a transparent manner for all to see if they haven't done their part to pay on time. Not only are they going to pay the late fees, but they report out how many times they're doing it, specifically what businesses and how much money that they're spending to pay out these penalties. They also not only are holding themselves accountable at this dashboard, but also holding the primes accountable by reporting out on those types of things. This gets to some of that reporting, transparency, and accountability is really the big piece that we were thinking about and listening to what we heard from staff as well as business owners. Specific to people and practices in this particular area, we looked at some case studies out of some groups that existed. For example, Harvard groups that were working within contracting practices and procurement excellence, as well as some other scans across the field. And this was really looking at where are teams functioning well and where are their dysfunctions and how are they structured? What does appropriate investment look like for particular teams so that they're able to do their work well, as well as how do the team structures work in terms of where staff are embedded to allow for more collaboration. So the example here we want to look at is a cross-departmental team out of the city of Tulsa. And so they participated in a cohort through the Procurement Excellence Committee, which was done through a Harvard study. And so something that they did is they created a 16-member cross-departmental committee or body that was able to help really assess their pain points, challenges, and barriers related to procurement. They were experiencing a lot of siloed activity and challenges across their organization. And through going through this cohort, decided to create this committee that was able to create and pilot and test specific projects organizational wide in response to what they were hearing from business owners and staff for challenges. And so they created improved process maps. They really engaged and listened to vendors and took from that listening specific tasks that they did as a committee organizational wide to address vendor experience challenges and had good outcomes from this. The next piece that we'll highlight here is data and IT. So here, being able to look at, we were really looking at some reporting requirements and how other jurisdictions are handling their reporting related to both their technology, but also accountability components. And thinking about the theme that we heard from the listening session related to challenges with technology, also wanted to see what are others doing with their contracting portals, dashboards, and the like related to finding opportunities. And so one example that we saw as an interesting case study here is looking at the Hawaii HAND system, which really is pulling contracting opportunities, not just for one jurisdiction, but across the entire, all of the islands state, but also key jurisdictions, county, cities, all into one place. And so there's a dashboard that highlights all the contract opportunities. People can click on it and learn more. But also what's nice about the dashboard that stuck out in direct response to something that we heard from business owners is that the dashboard groups the opportunities as well by key areas: construction, professional services, goods, other services, so that somebody could click on that graph, see, oh, wow, there's over 300 opportunities here. Let me click on this and dig through this and be able to get right to some of the things that we heard through the listening sessions. It also breaks out on different pages information specific to small and diverse businesses as well on this dashboard. Related to training and education, here, again, connecting what we heard in the listening session and digging deeper, really wanted to highlight for you all today of the examples we saw, some of the key hub information for training for staff, as well as tools that have information for business owners. Out of the state of Washington, they have a number of different tools and resources available specific to training. What stuck out here in terms of what we found is that not only do they have this information, but they have the infrastructure in place through their state statute requiring that procurement create specific training to their procurement processes, as well as requirements by job duty. So if you have somebody that's a project manager, they actually have a map and a table that shows these are the things that are required training for you. This is how often you need to be taking this training to stay up on it, and connecting that training and completion of it to their responsibilities of their given role. They also have required training highlighted specific to their efforts with business inclusion. And then that training is not just at that project management level, it's all the way up to the leadership level in terms of what needs to be done, how often, and again, connecting to both the learning for staff, but also the accountability for the organization to be aware of the processes and then advancing them. And then as it relates to access, outreach, and engagement, this piece, we really were looking at what's happening across the field related to limited English proficiency, LEP access, as well as ADA access, Americans with Disabilities Act access, and requirements specific in the business inclusion environment. And so an example here that we'll highlight looking at the Virginia Department of Transportation. And they had an example that was noted within one of the governing documents that procurement has highlighted in some of their training. But this highlight as an example from Virginia Department of Transportation that they realized that there are a number of particular individuals who were being removed from a construction project in Northern Virginia because they had to have a specific required certified concrete inspectors. When they dug a little deeper, they realized that this particular test that they had to take and the training materials were only available in English. And that's why so many of those in this particular population where English was not a first language were not taking it and getting the appropriate certification. So they used federal funds to be able to then translate all the training material into Spanish so that it can increase that access for those particular businesses who are DBEs and allow for them to get past that hurdle. So in terms of marketing and communication, this really was looking at the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act as one example from the federal government, and looking at some of the things that we saw cited to really get to that piece of business owners sharing, not only through the small business equity audit, but also through a survey that was previously offered by OEO in 2021 of the challenges of finding contract opportunities and some of the challenges with the site and technology. And so it was interesting with digging into the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act is just a really strong emphasis on being able to look at the user experience. Although information may exist, it really challenges government entities to engage the users, get their feedback, and make updates that are responsive to what they've identified or areas for improvement. And so with these things in mind, in the infrastructure assessment, we'll highlight just a couple of things here, a few things that we had assessed within these larger buckets. For the Metropolitan Council, as we were looking at policies, programs, and procedures, some of the key things that really stuck out as we learned from the staff, business owners, and the field scan is being able to see what policies, programs, procedures, and statutes exist in the marketplace, exist within Minnesota, that could be leveraged even further to accomplish the goals that the programs are seeking to do. And we found a number of things that surface for us. For example, some changes that have happened at the state level that could increase access for businesses, such as alignment with increasing particular thresholds and percentages for preference programs. Those are some tools that we saw have shifted and could be advanced to be able to move things forward and increase access. We also, in terms of looking at accountability, as much as different policies and procedures reference accountability within the Met Council's infrastructure, there aren't necessarily the type of detailed steps that we saw in other jurisdictions to really hold staff a little bit more accountable in terms of being able to advance these efforts. And the recommendations include some more detail behind some of those. As it relates to people and practices, some of the things that we highlight are silos and dysfunctions, similar to what was noted within the Tulsa example, and being able to really assess, are there opportunities there where a cross-departmental committee, or also looking at repositioning and positional power for particular departments could allow for more impact and the ability to advance particular change within the organization. As it relates to data and IT, technology is a pervasive issue. We heard it from the business owners as well as from the staff. The ability to report in the way that staff would like, the capabilities do not exist with the technology that's currently in place due to lack of interoperability and a very high level of touch from staff from a manual reporting component. To be able to provide the level of transparency and information that could be helpful for not only staff but also the broader community, there needs to be improvements within that technology that exists. And then also seeing in day-to-day practices related to accountability, that again, there could be some more tools leveraged to advance that further based off of what we saw through the field scan. In terms of training and education, as I'd highlighted previously, that does exist. There are training programs, there are educational opportunities, there are things that staff in both procurement OEO are doing and advancing internally and externally. And looking at some of the examples from the field scan, like that out of Washington, there's still some things more that could be done to be able to deepen that impact and connect the learning with increased accountability as well throughout by looking at some of the examples in the field scan. With access, outreach, and engagement, the big piece is within Met Council as an organization as a whole, there are departments, divisions, and teams that are doing great work to advance things like LEP, as was highlighted with the prior presentation. But that's not necessarily the case for every department and every team that has the same access to the resources and tools. And so being able to ensure and organizational why that's really being able to be advanced accordingly and have the resources to do so at every level for the organization. And then with marketing and communications, which intersects with some of the data and IT components, being able to increase website functionality and improve technology with the current business process and systems interference. I get tongue-tied on the BPSI EMS project that had an RFP out earlier this year that is really looking at streamlining technology, maybe an opportunity to improve a lot of these components, but would see as time would tell and being able to ensure that recommendations are folded in to integrate OEO in that process so that nothing is lost related to the efforts that they're doing as well as technological improvements are made. And so lastly, as we get into the recommendations that were made, there are a lot. And so we will just highlight a couple for each of these areas in the interest of time and moving forward. As it relates to policies, procedures, and programs, this is where we had the most recommendations for changes. In fact, 31 of them related to specific policy change programs, statutory changes that have been recommended. Some key highlights within this area really get to things related to advancing changes specific to prompt payment. There are statutory requirements that the government must pay. It's, as I've highlighted already, pay those at the tier when the government's the one contracting, so first tier or primes to sub, but being able to do more like the example out of California in terms of that accountability. Other recommendations really look at being able to align and update policies and procedures by removing, as I'd highlight, some of those thresholds, increasing particular thresholds and percentages, looking at how bidding is done where there could be some bidding preferences and incentives for primes that build on what we've seen across the marketplace, as well as being able to look at the accountability and good faith effort components. Something else that we saw in the field scan related to addressing intergenerational mobility, looked at things such as grants, loans, and working capital loans, technical assistance that have funds tied to it. And so the recommendations do include some recommendations specific to leveraging some tools available at the state statutes that could help advance things such as a working capital loan. With the people and foundations, to address some of the silos, we have recommendations related to how different team members are integrated across departments, as well as some of the cross-departmental team collaborations like the examples that we shared, and updates to policies and procedures with specific details around accountability, as well as training and tying training and performance evaluations a little more deeply like we saw from some of the examples in the field scan. With the tools, data and tools, big picture, updating the technology, ensuring, as I said, that OEO is a part of what's happening with the BP SIEMS project so that tools are streamlined and work for everybody within the organization, and increasing those interactive dashboards that can increase that transparency and ease for navigation. With the training and education, creating the guidebooks, creating the tools and learning platforms like examples out of Washington and different levels of training by those who are purchasing. with access, outreach, and engagement, looking at updating the LEP and LEP plans and ADA plans in alignment with some of the things that we have seen and discussed, as well as having targeted outreach that aligns with dollar thresholds that get at some of that contracting capacity pieces that some of the businesses shared. And then lastly, some of the key website updates related to sharing the story and marketing. The last piece within what we've shared as final materials, it includes a draft comprehensive report as well as a sample work plan on how to advance all of the recommendations that were included in the report, as well as an interactive site that includes the disaggregated data by race, stage of businesses, and gender through the process. And so with that, I thank you for the time and presentation. We'll stand for questions.
Wow. Any questions? I have one. I mean, I've been waiting for this report a long time. Anyway, so I'm a council member. My name is John Pacheco. What I don't see, and maybe it's in your bigger report, is what's your assessment of how are we doing and what would make it better, and have some specific metrics around better outreach based on us only serving this many people. How do we compare with other folks within our market? I mean, like I said, I looked at the RFP and I was really, I'm really hopeful that we can really use the data to make some improvements or realize that we're doing well. Either one, but I'm not seeing the metrics that could give us that information.
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. And so in terms of that component of it, within the infrastructure aspect, infrastructure assessment rather, within the report, it does go into comparing what the Metropolitan Council has in place against the field scan and what we saw and heard from the businesses, and being able to then, once we get to the recommendations, so the infrastructure assessment highlights things that are being done well. For example, the work that you're doing related to the meet and greets, we heard from businesses, both primes and subs through the process, that was increasing access and opportunity in terms of that outreach and ability to connect and connect with some of those decision makers and get some opportunities. However, in terms of areas for improvement, strong areas that we really highlighted compared to other jurisdictions, looked at being able to, specifically with this type of work that you're doing, improving efforts related to that language access component of things is one piece, as well as being with the outreach able to increase the ability for businesses to be able to request things such as debriefings after they haven't been awarded a contract, the ability to be able to schedule and go through in a more streamlined manner, the ability to request for things such as those meet and greets and have those occur on a more frequent basis. That's available by breaking out where a business is in terms of their contracting capacity. One of the recommendations looks at having specific meet and greets that are timed in relationship to when opportunities are coming available by looking at 2-year forecasts that could exist for the Met Council, and having those opportunities when it's known within the forecast that there are opportunities $100,000 or less, and looking at the business's contracting capacity to target those specific groups more intentionally so that there could be increased access and opportunities. There are examples such as those included within the report.
What I'm looking for, and again, maybe I just don't have all information, is something specific to what we're doing. And so if we, let's say the meet and greet, is the goal to have 20 people, and of the 20 people, 5 get compared to what we've been doing? And how do we compare that to the University of Minnesota, who does the same meet and greets? And, you know, I need something tangible here so that I can hang my hat on and say, we're doing this, and by doing this, we've achieved this, or by or if we get more resources or build our infrastructure, we will be greater at this. But it's kind of maybe at the 10,000 foot level that I'm not getting.
Gotcha. And so thank you, Council Member. And so to that end, and comparing against other jurisdictions, what we had within the recommendation. So I hear what you're saying. You're really looking for that specific of, if we hold 5 meet and greets, then we can have target 6 businesses here. These 6 businesses, we want this percentage of those businesses to be able to get opportunities. Within our recommendations, some of the key things that we're really looking at specific to the meet and greets is looking at a shorter timeline to be able to move more quickly to increase some of that access component of it. And so to your question of how does it compare to like the University of Minnesota, that comparison is not within the report. However, in terms of looking at what business owners asked would be most helpful for them to be able to get more of those opportunities. First and foremost is having the capacity, which we include in our recommendation from a staff perspective for the Met Council, to have more staff available to be able to offer, first off, more of these meet and greets. Currently, the process where it exists is one where they're alerted through certain kinds of emails, but not where you can go to the site, request, or see a calendar of events for a year out where they can be able to plan accordingly. And so that's where we're at in the terms of the recommendation specific to the meet and greet component of things, is looking at how to increase those and have them be more strategic in terms of which groups are targeted so that they can have more increased opportunities. By specifically targeting $100,000 or less, we're looking at opportunities that are under where departments and project managers might be able to go direct to businesses or be able to do MCUB Direct, MCUB Select, or the preference at a different rate because of that threshold, with a goal to be able to increase. And then to your point of tracking the metrics in the data and IT section, it does recommend to be able to track the number of opportunities that are being awarded to businesses based off of this. We'd highlighted with the data components that it is difficult, and currently the Met Council, which we did highlight as a pain point and an improvement point with your technology, there's not an ability currently to track some of the things that we've recommended to be able to answer your question of how do we compare to where we've been. For some things, the data is not being tracked, so we recommend a baseline of building that infrastructure and strongly encouraging that you are tracking broken out by things such as MCUB Select, MCUB Direct, and your MCUB preferences, so we can get at some of the things that you've highlighted.
Yes, Councilman.
This is a lot of information and very, very fast, and I appreciate it that it needed to be. Thank you for the work. I do see a number of recommendations that are actionable, very obviously actionable, and a number of them which appear to need actions, to need goals to be established and actions to be added. The open data, is one area. Technology will help us to beef up the website so that it can be better used, but it will also help us with accountability and transparency as well. And that seems like a whole, work project for the council down the line. My question, I see the process that you went through in order to develop this whole big set of recommendations. You mentioned 31 just in policies and procedures and programs, and I wonder how many others in all of the areas. It would be great to see the entire report and see all of the recommendations listed within those areas. But to boil it down, the question is, what is next? This report, I know, engaged a lot of people and collected a lot of information. Is there, and I may have missed it because the slides are cut off as we're looking at them, and we'll look online and maybe be able to see some of this information, but is there a work team that is actually hearing back and developing a plan based on the recommendations? And where will that go? Perhaps, Mr. Chair, you're more aware than I am as well, but I'm looking to understand what the next steps are so that we can take advantage of this wonderful work and assessment, of your sharing with us things that are happening in other areas and making these recommendations for us to implement. What is the next step? Who has this ball? And how do we continue to register in and make this work go?
Thank you, Council Member. And so in terms of what we put within the materials that are shared, and also to circle back to the prior question, within one of the last things that we included as an appendix is a work plan. Within the work plan that we included with the draft report, for every single one of the recommendations that are included, so the 31 in the first bucket, each one of those has a column within the work plan that highlights KPI, key performance indicators, and metrics and outcomes to assess progress on each of those pieces. And so that's something that I did want to highlight is included in the work plan so that as technology exists, to the prior question, we're able to track some of that progress a little bit better. And to your question, Councilmember Carter, what's highlighted there in the work plan really breaks down for each task recommendations on which Metropolitan Council departments and divisions should be a part of moving things forward. So from our perspective, one of the big next steps to be able to move this ahead, not only is being able to get particular recommendations that are made approved to proceed or to make the particular policy and procedure amendments, but really is advancing a type of cross-departmental committee that can help to implement this, because it is there are a lot of recommendations. There are huge asks within the report and recommendations that are there. And as such, it would require for success to occur for any of those, for several different departments and divisions across your enterprise to be able to work together. And so again, as with the example of the city of Tulsa, strongly encouraging that a cross-departmental committee is formed that can have people working collaboratively, to advance these efforts enterprise-wide.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would just simply encourage that we continue to ask that question and hear this back at our Metropolitan Council committees as well, to understand how that work plan is being organized and what is being moved forward, and to share that back here as well.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I need to absorb this as well and see how, but, because one thing leads to another, and I can tell you right now, the assumption is that we're understaffed or under-resourced. But until I know that I can say, well, this is what we've done and here's how are we understaffed and what, it's not just our assumption. And so there's a lot of these little measurements in between, whether it's the meet and greets or whatever, that we can actually say, here's what we've been doing and here's what others are doing and here's why we're shy of where we could be. And that gives us the tools to go back, say, and it also helps us understand where we're going. So having a work plan at the end of this is going to be, to me, one of the most important things that will be achieved. Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, so at the beginning you said that this is following like a Wells Fargo methodology, or it was kind of, I didn't quite catch that part. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of wondering what was said there, if you could just kind of like explain that a little bit more.
Absolutely. What I had referenced there was in the field scan and broader research that in the last 2019 to the beginning of this year, American Express used to put out a report every other year called the State of Women-Owned Businesses. This year, Wells Fargo, early maybe January or February of 2024, they similarly put out a State of Women-Owned Business report. And so what I was highlighting there is, in looking at examples like reports such as those two put out by larger banks, the disaggregation of female businesses by race is something that some reports don't do. They group minority women in with minority businesses, but there are distinctions between female businesses based off of race as well as stage of business, as is within male and female minority businesses. And so we wanted to highlight in our methodology with disaggregating data that we wanted to be able to separate that out so we could assess for those particular businesses what they highlighted as some of their top barriers and challenges, as well as hopes for the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cedar covered quite a bit. Thank you to Cedar for joining us today. We are going to continue these conversations and wait for the final report. We also have a series of presentations we'll be doing internally. And some of the council members here today will have an opportunity to engage with us more as well. Or actually, all of the council members here will have an opportunity to engage more. So, yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We really don't have much in the agenda at this point. I'll just point out maybe a few points of information. One, we are considering the next meeting to go to a hybrid, not hybrid, to go to
Online.
Virtual.
Yes.
Virtual meeting, so and maybe this is the right time to do it. We have unfortunately have not achieved quorum again. And we, for as much as we put the rules in and say you gotta be here for at least 2 or don't miss 3, and we're not getting the response that we thought we would be getting. And maybe the hybrid is, or not hybrid, but the virtual will help get us that point. Historically, people said I've had to come from Minneapolis and come over here during rush hour, and there's other things, and then, so we'll report back of when and how we're gonna implement the recommendation, and for some reason we can't, I've been told we can't do virtual, that it'll be one or the other. Either it will be live or or virtual. I mean, I wanna see that because I attended the Minneapolis regional chamber board meeting, and they have 40 members. And half of them were up there and half of them were around the table, and it seemed to work fairly well. I don't know if there's any board or legal requirements to have. We looked at that, and they said we could meet virtual. So anyway, it's more to come on that. At our last meeting, we had a presentation on the Blue Line process, and we discussed the possibility of advising, using our role as an advisory body and making recommendations here. I didn't know then what the process would be, so I followed up with Ryan and O'Connor, who's the regional administrator, and he wasn't sure either, so we brought Charlie in the room. So the plan right now is that we'll come up with a draft. We'll circulate it, and then it'll go to Charlie as the chair, and as well as the regional administrator. It's not a really standing procedure, but we're doing our role, fulfilling our role as an advisory body. And so we'll get that around. That's still moving ahead. I think, so we'll also be following up on that. Again, that's based on what the recommendation was at our last meeting. Other than that, I don't have anything else. Anybody else?
Yeah, I did have a question, and we talked about this before. Are we gonna move forward and maybe have a system so that we have an alternate in place for each position on here? And then maybe have a system where if a person misses a certain amount of meetings, then the alternate becomes the primary person?
I don't think, that was not in the last recommendation,
Okay.
recommended changes in the bylaws. We'll have to go back again, and to put that in.
Okay.
Right now, I think our best bet is to look at the virtual, to be honest with you,
Okay,
just to,
okay.
put that in.
Okay.
We offer food,
Well,
we offer
and
the
that's another question I had, and I've asked this before, but I was looking at it, now, there's always been a lot of question about paying people, right? Well, again, we pay people for jury duty, and that's been going on for I don't know how many years in this country. And there are 3 different ways we could pay them, and maybe one path is easier to get done than another. You could pay them based on per diem, you could pay a stipend, or you could pay a salary. You're not gonna pay a salary because you don't want them as employees, I would imagine. Or,
Well, they understand that with the compensating advisory is done at the state level. There is some prohibition of doing it for some bodies. I know most of them, not most, I'd say, I know I've been on a few myself, but I know other state bodies will do a per diem, $50 per meeting type thing. I know that our legislative agenda, ours being the Met Council, does have some language that we are trying to get passed to provide some payment. And so I just don't know where it's at, but there is legislation that they've tried before and it didn't go. And so I think that last I heard that we were still attempting that. That's also even for payment of council members and what level they're at and stuff. So stay tuned, I guess, on that one too, but.
because I was hoping if we could get into a carrot and stick position.
Right.
Where you had disincentive because you could be replaced by your alternate, incentive because you're being compensated in some way, that, then it kind of, it's all civic duty and anybody should be proud to do it. But, reality is people aren't like that typically across the board.
Years ago, I was on the governor's task force on juvenile justice, and that was $50 a meeting. And I know there's other bodies like that, advisory, that are that have that. But I can look it up and have a Secretary of State's office report that. But again, I know we're looking at it. Anything else? If not, I'll adjourn this meeting. And thank you for all of you that showed.